The European Union and the IMF are to send a crisis team to Ireland, paving the way for a potential bailout. The Irish are still resisting, knowing that the only way to make it politically acceptable is to dress any agreement up as a bailout for its stricken banks rather than the government. But the longer Ireland holds out, the more the crisis threatens to engulf Portugal and then potentially Italy or Spain. And joining me from London is David Buik from BGC Partners. David Buik, I need to ask you, when is a bailout not a bailout?
That's the $64,000 question. The fact remains is we really need to put this matter to bed, this whole question of the contagion of sovereign debt in Europe, particularly in the case of Ireland and Greece. Ireland's at the front of the queue at the moment because they deny emphatically that they need any kind of cash at all between now and 2011. By approximately June. This may well be the case. They have a borrowing requirement of £23 billion, and they've also let their banks have the best part of €50 billion. And there's no question of any doubt about it, as the days go by, the Irish banks are becoming under more and more duress, they're losing deposits, and the value of their assets are decreasing by the day. There's been an ongoing conversation between the European Union, the ECB, and of course the IMF, hopefully that can persuade the Taoiseach Cowan and also Finance Minister Brian Lenihan to accept financial help to calm the markets. Now, there's no way that the financial help can go direct to the Irish banks, which is really where it's required.
But you think, David, you actually think that the Irish government should accept this European bailout money, even if there are strings attached?
I think that these strings, well, first to answer the question, absolutely they should accept the bailout money because they need it in the future, and the future is extremely unclear for the Irish banks. No, they don't want to sell everything down the river that they've actually worked for over the years, but I'm sure a sensible deal can be done, rescheduling the debt over a much longer, more protracted period of time. Because the one thing the Irish people do not want to surrender is this 12.5% corporation tax which they charge, which of course when you're trying to get your budget deficit down is extremely cheap. But they've attracted a huge number of international companies to go to Ireland to manufacture things and to export things.
Don't you think there'll be a lot of pressure on them to raise that corporations tax by countries like Germany?
I think that'll be cutting the umbilical cord. I hope they don't do it, because if Ireland is to recover over a reasonable period of time, it needs growth. And it gets growth from its exports and its ability to trade. It's only a small country of 3.5 million people, and its ability to trade well. It does an enormous amount of business, of course, with the United Kingdom. So we have a vested interest to see in the United Kingdom Ireland recover. And we want them really basically to accept this money without ridiculous strings being attached. And the fact is that I think it's all really a question of rescheduling the debt and having the help of the IMF. Because what is happening is that the respect for the European Union and for the euro is diminishing by the day. It's creating a serious amount of concern. It doesn't augur well for the European governments going forward. What governments need to always show is strong leadership.
And indeed, Angela Merkel and the European President this week are saying that the EU and the euro are fighting for their survival. Do you see it as drastic as that?
Well, I do, because basically when you have an operation or a gathering together of 27 countries, it's virtually impossible to sing from the same hymn sheet. And to be honest, I think really Germany and France and perhaps the Benelux countries are the most important constituent countries within that. And therefore it's not surprising when we see them calling the shots more than the rest of the people. But the problem with this is that if you can't pull people into line very quickly, contagion is a very dangerous thing. It's like measles or smallpox back in 1660, is that once it starts, it never stops. So you started with Greece, you're now on to Ireland. Portugal, I think, is a fairly modest problem. Spain could be a very serious problem. And then it could be Italy, and then it could be the United Kingdom, though I don't think it will be, because we are repaying our debt.
But it does come back to the negotiations with Ireland, doesn't it? Because if they are required to give up key areas of economic and even political sovereignty, that could mean a loss for the Irish government of their majority.
Well, it could mean a loss for their majority, but on the other side of the coin is that people are taking salary cuts, the public services are trashed to ribbons, the outlook is extremely grim, and what Ireland needs above everything else is stability. Now, what does the surrender of sovereignty mean? It can come in very many different parcels. The most important thing is that the business unit of Ireland, which is basically strong, and it's the banks that are weak. It's the banks, nothing else, that Ireland has dragged it all down. Now, this is an ongoing problem, and it's going to take an awful long time to sort it out. And therefore, rescheduling some kind of debt with help, which is going via the Irish government, but is directly controlled into putting the banks on a stronger footing, must be a prerequisite if this situation is to recover. The longer you keep it, markets cope brilliantly with good news. In fact, particularly, they cope even better with bad news. They don't cope with uncertainty, and they don't cope with lack of leadership. And that's what they're getting in spades at the moment.
All right, David Buik. Well, you've been warning about this for some time. We should call you our canary from Canary Wharf. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
You're welcome.